We're live.
Good evening, councillors, and welcome viewers to this meeting of the Communities and Environment Committee. The meeting is being recorded, as you know, as you can see it. So just I'm going to click on that now. We first of all, please, Simon, can you do a roll call of the councillors, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Buckler.
Yep.
Bull.
Here.
Martin Burfoot.
Here.
Froggatt.
Here.
Furness.
Here.
Gamble.
Here.
Hobson.
Here.
Hughes.
Here.
Tony Morley.
Here.
O'Brien.
Here.
Councillor Pawley.
Here.
Purdy.
Here.
Ratcliffe.
Here.
Datham.
Here.
Sutton.
Here.
Wayne.
Here.
And Wakeman.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you, Chair. All present.
Oh, thank you. So no apologies, obviously. So that covers that item. The next item is public participation. As far as I'm aware, we haven't got any. Is that correct?
None have been received by committee, Chair.
Thank you. The next item is interest. Do any councillors have any interest to declare in the items on the agenda, please? We'll take that as a no, I think. So item 4 on the agenda is the Derbyshire Dale Statement of Community Involvement 2020. Mike, please, would you take us through that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As the report sets out, the Derbyshire Dale Statement of Community Involvement is a document which sets out the standards which the community and residents of Derbyshire Dales can expect in regard to consultation on planning policy documents and also on planning applications. It's another document which we are required to review because we're in the sort of period of 5 years, or in the period up to 5 years from adoption, with the last version being adopted in January 2019. As you'll see in the report, one of the issues within the document is that given the current sort of circumstances, the government's been looking at how local authorities like ourselves should undertake policy consultation and other consultation, and it's made the statement that we should be looking to do that digital by default. That's not to say that we won't be doing other means of consultation, but the predominant way that they're looking is to make sure that it's done digitally by default. It's also within the document set out that we are being allowed to undertake more consultation in a more flexible way, particularly in regards to planning applications, where we are being encouraged to use social media more to publicise planning applications rather than the traditional way of advertising as public notices in local newspapers. The draft revised Statement of Community Involvement is set out in Appendix 1 to the report. And the recommendation we have in the papers this evening is that we would look to try and do a 6-week period of consultation, and we're looking for members to give authority for us to proceed on that and then report back once we've done that consultation. Happy to answer any questions.
I can't see any hands up. Are there any questions of Mike, please? Councillor Ratcliffe?
Right, thank you, Chair. An interesting report, and it clearly links with the next item, which is that of revising the local plan. Now, Mike, if I may, a couple of questions, and I'm referring in the first instance to paragraph 2.1, which talks about the previous statement of community involvement in 2019. Now, as I think you've just indicated, clearly some of the circumstances have changed since that time. But it seems to me that there are also things at this moment, should we adopt this and translate it into action, that will affect even this report, as it were. And I'm thinking not least of which, of course, is COVID-19, which seems to me something that is going to be going forward into 2021? That's the first thing. But secondly, the ramifications of the government's white paper. If they're insistent on taking forward that to my mind is going to undermine so much of community involvement in planning, whether it be strategically like the local plan or planning applications themselves. So I'd like to just to hear your comments on first of all, just what I've said, and then I've another question.
Okay.
Mike, please.
Yeah, in terms of the first point that Councillor Ratcliffe made, one of the things that we have reflected upon in the draft SCI, which is in the appendix, is the guidance which has been coming out from the government to reflect, particularly in the earlier stages of COVID-19, the sort of response that they were making on sort of adapting to the circumstances that, you know, public weren't allowed to go into public places, and those sorts of things. So in that respect, things like digital by default and the use of social media have come directly out of the events that we've had over the past 9 months of this, or 8 months of this particular year. So they're reflected in that, and clearly, you know, we will continue those as we are required to continue with those. As I said in the introduction, what we're doing is trying to deliver consultation where it needs to be done in the most effective way, but not trying to disenfranchise people from being engaged within both the planning application process and you know, more latterly in terms of the planning policy side of stuff in the new year, where they're not disenfranchised from getting engaged in that process as well. In terms of the white paper, you know, the discussion that we've had, or the report that you've seen on that, sets out proposals from the government on changes to the planning system. Those are very high level changes, and if and when those changes come in, there will be needs to change primary and secondary legislation. It may or may not have an impact upon how we undertake and set out our requirements in the statement of community involvement, for example. So at this moment in time, I haven't got a crystal ball to say exactly what the changes will be going forward in relation to this particular document.
No, thank you for your answer there, Mike. I appreciate it. My second question relates to paragraph 2.8 and neighbourhood planning, something that I've always had an interest in, as you well know. When Worksworth did its neighbourhood plan, I think I'm correct in saying that we drew down via the district council sums certainly well in excess of £12,000. It could have even been as high as 18,000, and not inconsiderable officer time, your own particularly, and we're always grateful for your input there. What monies do you feel, given our restraints over finance, which again will be going forward into the future years, and probably will even tighter purse strings from the government, do you think will be realistically available, both monies and officer resources, for future neighbourhood planning? I suppose the direct question is, will there be enough to successfully bring any new neighbourhood planning about?
Well, there's two answers to that, Councillor Ratcliffe. The first one is the funding that the local authority receives to help it provide the assistance in officer time to parish and town councils to develop those, and we get that on the allocation of a neighbourhood area. Plus, we also get funding to assist with the costs associated with the examination and the referendum. Now, those cover our statutory involvement, if you like, in neighbourhood planning. And at the moment, in terms of the other side of things, there is funding available from the government to help town and parish councils to develop their own neighbourhood plans, given that the government is still supportive of the preparation of neighbourhood plans, not just in the current system, but in the future white paper. It's very supportive of neighbourhood plans and taking, you know, the role that they can play. I would envisage that there will still be some monies available from the government to allow them to facilitate community groups taking them forward.
Councillor Pawley.
Yes, thank you. I want to refer to the Statement of Community Involvement, paragraph 4.2, on page 9 and 19 of the report. It says in there that local plans should reflect the collective vision and priorities of the community. Now, if those priorities conflict with central government priorities, which gets the most weight? Could you give me an idea of that, please?
Okay. So the idea is that, you know, by having early engagement with local communities and drawing down all the evidence, that the district council comes to a view as to what it thinks is an appropriate strategy for its area. That is then subject to various rounds of public consultation, and clearly, you know, local communities and residents get involved in that, as do statutory stakeholders. But at the end of that particular process, there is also an examination, and the examination looks at the extent to which the local plan is compliant with national policy. And if the inspector who undertakes that particular examination doesn't consider that the local plan is in conformity with national policy, he will tell the district council that is the case. And he will then probably tell us to start thinking about making revisions to make sure it becomes more in line with national policy.
Is that okay? Councillor Wayne, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Mr. Hayes for the report, and also for the responses that he's given me to a number of questions that I sent in prior to the meeting. I just want to make an observation and just a couple of more questions, if that's possible, please. From my limited experience as a councillor, I feel that there is a need to improve community involvement, not only at the local plan stage, but also through subsequent applications. Regarding a site close to myself up here in Matlock, I'm aware that the planners and the developers have been having regular contact with the local planning authority, but requests from a local action group have been dismissed, and this appears somewhat undemocratic and falls short of what's required. That's an observation from myself. I feel that we must always remember, and I know we've mentioned about digital by default, we must always remember that the communities, we've got a great deal of knowledge and skill to pass on with the decision-making process, and they must be heard and the comments acknowledged. In relation to digital by default, how can we determine what residents have issues, like may have learning difficulties, or elderly or disadvantaged, and how can we overcome these issues to ensure that consultation is fair for all? I'm just mindful that we want to try and embrace everybody if we can, but we might be missing some people. Have we got any way of capturing data that says where the people do have any needs? That's the first question. Do you want to answer that one?
We've got, you know, a very wide-ranging database of people that have engaged with us previously from the previous rounds of local plan preparation, that we managed to keep up to date as best we can. Clearly, sort of people move around and one thing and another, and we use that initially as our starting point. We are, you know, we don't have perfect knowledge. I will say this: we don't have perfect knowledge of where all of the groups are that are out there that might want to be engaged within the plan process, and we use whatever means we can to get those involved. And sometimes they come to us by a circuitous route, and sometimes they might come to us, say, for example, through the town and parish councils, and using those sort of avenues of introduction, if you like, we can sort of start to engage with those groups which are maybe a little bit sort of lesser known and not necessarily traditionally got involved in the planning process. So I think, you know, that we will do what we can, and we will use whatever avenues we can to try and engage as many people as possible. And it's a question that we get asked, you know, quite a lot when we go through planning consultation exercises. Why have we not got more people involved? You know, we can do what we can to advertise and make sure that people are aware through our various mechanisms. We can't necessarily force them to actually make comments on particular proposals. And generally, as I've said to members in the past, the more controversial a proposal, the more likelihood there'll be engagement.
Thank you. The second question is in relation to 5.2, evidence gathering. It states that the District Council gathers all relevant social, economic and environmental information to provide a comprehensive and robust plan preparation. What I want to know, it obviously goes across many organisations, but where is this information stored, and how can individuals and council obtain access to this information? The reason I'm asking is because, as you're well aware, I've been wanting to get some information from a previous application for the local plan advisory when the Grixton site was not put in, was recommended not to be put into the local plan, and then it was subsequently put into the local plan a short time after. I'm trying to obtain documentation, and it says where it's stored. Can you tell me where the information would be stored so I can have access to it from the previous plan, please?
I don't exactly know the answer to that one, Councillor Wayne, at this moment in time. If you want to send me a note of what you're exactly looking for, then I can give you a written response and identify where that information is.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Really, my points have probably been covered. But I'd like to ask the first of Councillor Wayne's questions in a slightly different form. I'm aware in my work over the last year as a councillor that there are a number of people who have difficulty accessing digital documents. I don't classify myself in that group. I very much approve of digital by default, but there are a lot of people who do want to respond to particular applications or to document consultations on, for example, the local plan or other consultations, and they need to have access in paper form because they don't have ready access to digital technology, or they've never been trained in the digital technology, so they find it very difficult to use. And indeed, I'm going to help somebody tomorrow because of that they don't have sufficient experience with digital technology to be able to work through. Now, so therefore, I do feel that while we might be digital by default, we must provide other forms of access to the data that's available that they need to look at, and allow other means of interacting with the council. And Mike, I'd be very grateful if you could outline how people who aren't able to use digital technology, either because they haven't got broadband, because the broadband doesn't reach them in country areas, or because they don't have the skill, they don't have the money, or they don't have or they have some sort of disability or too old, that makes use of digital technology very difficult. I'd be grateful if you could tell us how they can access the information.
In sort of normal circumstances, Councillor Hughes, the situation would be that the documents that we were consulting on, we make available in places like the town hall, the local libraries, the leisure centres, those sorts of places where, you know, general members of the public could gain sort of ready access. And that would be the normal sort of approach that we would take, in addition to the digital by default. We're in different circumstances at the moment, and clearly a lot depends upon the nature of the type of consultation that we're undertaking. That will dictate exactly what type of sort of access to public documents we think is necessary. So for example, something that's a much more technical document and more interested for the development industry, we probably wouldn't have as wide a consultation within those areas, whereas something that's sort of got much more relevance and much more interest to local communities, if we were able to do so because of the circumstances that are surrounding at the moment, if we're able to do it, we will make it more widely available in those sorts of arenas.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Chair. It's not a question, it's a comment. If anyone can come in, please.
Yeah, by all means, yeah.
Yeah, it's a thank you, really. It's going right back to the beginning to Councillor Ratcliffe's point about the work that he did for the neighbourhood plan in his own area and the help that he's provided to other areas who are providing the neighbourhood plan, preparing a neighbourhood plan at no charge in his own time, irrespective of any political bias. So I'd like to thank him for that. And I make the point also that the neighbourhood plans are a cornerstone of this engagement, and the town and parish councils must engage with us as far as possible. It's not just for us to reach out to them. Therefore, what Mike Ratcliffe did has been out, he's been down to Doveridge, he's been round to Brailsford, and I'd also like to thank Mike Hayes, because he is incredibly helpful in preparing these cornerstone neighbourhood plans, and he's making time in a busy diary. So if we can encourage and facilitate the communication between the groups, the councils, town parish councils, he's working on one at the moment, I happen to know about, it's not mine. It's not all down to us to reach out to them. We just let them know how to do it. And as I say, we've got the experience in-house. Thank you very much. And a good report. Thanks, Mike.
Councillor, are you moving the recommendations? Councillor Morley?
Sorry, I just muted myself. Yes, I would like to move it. Again, you know, and I'd like it minuting that we're not just there to encourage our communities to reach out. The help is there for them if we will open the doors. And yes, I'm moving it, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question relating to consultation on planning applications, and specifically pre-consultation on planning applications. The government has for some time now encouraged applicants to actively consult prior to submitting planning applications to try to get agreement and consensus in the local community, and a very admirable aspect of the current government's policy, I think. There's no mention of this in the statement here in respect of planning applications that the council is going to submit on its own behalf for its own development. So I'm intrigued as to why the council doesn't appear to be following central government policy in this respect, including in its statement of community involvement the advantages or a commitment to consult prior to planning applications being submitted when it's proposing its own development. We encourage third parties, private developers, to engage with the community, but we don't seem to be taking that step when it's related to our own development. So can you explain why there's that apparent omission in the statement?
The fact of the matter is that the advice and the requirement from the government relates to major applications, and not necessarily every application that the district council will submit is a major application. Where it falls within the category of being a major application, then I don't see any reason why the district council shouldn't undertake pre-application consultation in that way, in the way in which it's encouraged. But it's clearly defined within the legislation as being major applications.
But it's not referred to at all in the statement, whether it's major, minor, or contentious.
Paragraph 7.66 talks about good practice suggests that local planning authorities should actively encourage developers of major schemes to inform and involve the community in shaping their proposals. Paragraph 7.66, Chair.
Yeah, I understand that, Mike. It's when the council is its own developer submitting its own application. Does that commitment apply to the district council?
There's no requirement for the district council to undertake consultation pre-application stage unless it falls within a major category.
So if it does, it would.
Yes.
Right.
Councillor Buckley, you had your hand up, but it seems to be down now. Is that correct? Do you want to speak?
Yes. So in one of the questions, it says that we have a lot considerable experience of engaging with local community and working with partners. What are our communication levels comparable with other local authorities? You know, do we get the same level of responses as other local authorities? More, fewer? You know, it would be good to know how we're getting more people to be engaged with the process, or if we're just getting the same people engaging, commenting on every application.
Okay. As I said before, you know, generally, I think we have a good sort of level of engagement with the community, and a lot depends upon the extent of the policy or proposal or application that is before the authority or subject to public consultation. Clearly something that's got more controversial elements to it is likely to generate more engagement and more comments from members of the public, etc. And that will be the same in every different local planning authority. So the more controversial an item, the more the likelihood is that it will draw comments from residents going forward. Similarly, a less controversial item, something which has got very little sort of interest in the public domain, will likely get less interest, regardless of how much we actually, as a planning authority, seek to advertise and make the documentation available for people to comment upon.
Councillor Purdy.
Well, one or two points have been covered, but very quickly, Chair, I just want to pick up on Councillor Ratcliffe's point about public engagement. I've sent my views in, and that is an area of concern I have. And that's also been echoed by D2N2, who are putting a collective statement back in on it. So just to assure Mike that is an area of concern. I just wonder, Mike, if our new transformation service is going to help with this digital technology. It's a fact that some areas will be missed and some people will read the notice and then probably take no action. So there's a great mix in this arena. I just wonder if our new transformation service is going to help in any way.
I think the transformation service will be beneficial, and I have to say it's probably to those that are more digitally accessible, if that's the right terminology, because what we're trying to do with the transformation scheme is make our engagement not just through the planning process, but also across the authority, more widely available through a digital means, and lots more interactions, for example, through our website, and having a much broader understanding of our customers through the customer relations management system that we have. Having said that, that system also has the potential, I would suspect, to be able to identify some people where they're not necessarily immediately available to access themselves and avail themselves to digital means. You know, we've been quite successful over the course of the last 12 months, well, since April the 1st, when we introduced a new front page of the website and a new CRM system, to getting more clicks through the website and more engagement through the website. So, you know, in that regard, our transformation scheme is working corporately, and I don't see any reason why it can't work for planning related issues as we take it forward either.
Councillor Hobson.
Chair, I'm happy to second the recommendation that delegated authority is given and we commence a period of 6 weeks public consultation, and then the report will come back at a later time. When this authority first went for digital by default, I remember saying that it was important that we listen to those people who weren't digital by default. So I'm encouraged by Mike's comments. It is important that we engage with a wide variety of our residents and stakeholders, to coin a phrase. So thank you for his comments on that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wakeman.
My question's already been answered. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Morley, you want to come back again?
Yes, if I may, Chair. Yeah, it's just a quick response. Jim Fern is probably listening in. He will have the numbers of how many clicks we get through the website, and he is invaluable in getting the word out there. And as one of my colleagues said earlier on, often we have to go out and sit with, at socially distance, sit with people and do it. But then that's part of the job. So I'm sure Jim would be happy to provide the number of people who visit our site and how we could use it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Burfoot. Councillor, you're still not showing on my screen with hands up, but I've been told that you do wish to speak.
Yeah, that's right, yes. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just going back to previous questions that have been raised by, well, several councillors actually, about digital by default and so on. I'm just wondering if Mike or anyone else can tell me what our excellent staff who man the switchboards actually say to residents who phone up about any subject really and are unable to access anything digitally because they're unable to, as Councillor Hughes said, or too old, or unable to do because they can't afford the technology. What are they told? What are they informed? What answer do they get from the switchboard if they want to access some information? Will nothing be sent to them in the post? And obviously in the present situation, and probably worse on Thursday, from Thursday onwards, they may be unable to get this information by paper means or whatever, unless, I suppose, we post it to them. So what answer do they get?
Chair, I can only answer for what happens with regards to sort of the planning service. And typically what happens within the planning service when we have a consultation, if a member of the public contacts the switchboard and says, I can't access the website, can you send some information out to me in the post, then that telephone call is generally put through to myself or one of the members of my team, and we will then facilitate that particular action. As I say, we are trying to encourage digital by default, but we will facilitate comments by other means, and if it means we have to send things out by post, we will do so.
Thanks very much for that. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes, do you want to come back again? Councillor Hughes.
Sorry, yes, I was just unmuting. Thank you very much, Chair, for letting me come back again. Can I return back to Councillor Wayne's comment, his initial comment when he was talking about pressure groups and so on, who may wish to comment on a planning application, or may wish to meet with the planning officers to discuss their particular concerns about applications. It does seem to me that the process is favours the developer, because the developer gets more access to officers than do people who may take a contrary view to the development. And so there's a question really. What effort is the council making, or what process does the council have for engaging with people who take a contrary position on planning applications and wish to be represented and discuss their particular concerns with officers?
Planning officers, both in the policy team and the development management team, are effectively only at the end of a telephone call. And clearly, if somebody from a particular action group wishes to have a discussion with an officer about a particular proposal, they are accessible by the phone, they're accessible by email, and that can then start the dialogue off. clearly there is a particular process whereby representations need to be made on particular planning applications, and those ultimately will get reported to planning committee or the local plan advisory group or council in whatever form it's been made in respect of. So, you know, that then means that their comments not only just get heard by the officer, but also then get into the public domain in the same way that a developer's comments and reports are also made available in the public domain as well.
But in some circumstances, particularly with major developments, the comments can be complex and difficult. I mean, for example, flooding, or the issues arising that might create flooding, or transport links, or various other things like that. And really, in some instances, a presentation is needed to put that contrary view to the one that the developer puts. And we all know that developers are clearly putting forward proposals which are advantageous to their developers. And it does seem to me that the system doesn't necessarily take consideration of, therefore, as a contrary view to the same extent. And we all know that that's a concern in terms of local democracy. And do you think that we should be doing something more to enable the people who have put a lot of their own money or time into demonstrating where the developers are mistaken in what they're putting forward? Do you think there should be more effort on planners' behalf, planning officers' behalf, to listen and to consider those contrary positions in face to face rather than just by looking at a particular document?
Chair, I have to say that I hear what Councillor Hughes is saying and I hear the views that he's making, the comments he's making, but as I said in my previous response, there is equal access to planning officers by both those that are developers and those that may have an opposite view.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for those answers, Mike. I have no other speakers. So, Simon, can we go to the vote now, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Buckler.
For.
Bull.
For.
Martin Urthorpe.
For.
Froggatt.
For.
Furness.
For.
Gamble.
For.
Hobson.
For.
Hughes.
For.
Tony Morley.
For.
O'Brien.
For.
Pawley.
For.
Purdy.
For.
Ratcliffe.
For.
Statham.
For.
Sutton.
For.
Wayne.
For.
And Wakeman.
For.
Okay, Chair, that's 17. That's unanimous.
Thank you. That's carried. So we move on to item 5, which is the Derbyshire Dales Local Development Scheme 2020 to 23. Mike, can you run us through that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the local development scheme is a 3-year timetable for setting out the progression and preparation review of our local plan. We had a previous local development scheme adopted in 2018, and at that particular time we said that if we were going to commence a review, that we would need to review our local development scheme, and that's what we're taking forward at this particular instance. The timetable that's set out in the appendix to the report ties in with the report that's going to council next Monday evening on the local plan review. Unlike the statement of community involvement, this does not require any public participation, and all we're seeking from members tonight is authority to adopt it and to put it into place immediately.
Thanks, Mike. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you very much, Mike, for this report. It's got quite a long prologue, but in this case, I think it was worth it because there's a need for that prologue to particularly for those people who are going to take part in the working group associated with the local plan. I've only got one. I mean, I think it's a very thorough report, and it tells us what we need to know in order to start work on the local plan and carry it forward. So thank you very much, Mike, for producing this. My only question at this stage is, again, it comes back to the planning for the future white paper. It's possible that the planning for the future white paper will overtake what we do in terms of preparing a revised local plan, but we will be faced with having probably employed some consultants to do some consultancy work, and therefore we'll be out of pocket in terms of expenses. And I was wondering if Mike, you had any thoughts on the risk associated with adapting the local plan to the needs of the planning for the future white paper as those proposals develop in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, as I've said in the response I gave to the previous item, the planning white paper is sort of at very high level, and there's quite a lot of work to be done to get to the point where those proposals come into force. Not necessarily, this primary and secondary legislation is required to enact some of those provisions. The advice that has been given by the Planning Advisory Service, which is a sort of an advisory group from CLG, is that essentially, you need to continue with the work that you're doing on your local plan review until we get much further down the line. And given where we are on this, and it's a comment that's made in the report that's going to council next week as well, is that we should continue with what we're doing for the foreseeable future. And clearly, as the white paper and the outcomes of the white paper emerge, we will have to see what we need to do to reflect those at that particular point in time.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, some interesting discussion this evening about the likely impact of the white paper. And I think myself, if it's taken forward, even to a modest degree by the government, it's going to affect some of our future thinking. Just a very quick statement, but I do have a question, so bear with me, Chair. As someone who was involved in the previous local plan advisory group, I can't wait to get started on this again, because I think there is so much that has happened since we last engaged with this, that I think now is the time to actually get to grips with a review. One of the anxieties I have, though, last time there was widespread workshops, discussions, public engagement. It was to my mind a good, thorough piece of work there. I don't think it's going to be quite the same this time, quite honestly, and that somewhat upsets me, because I just feel that members of the public need to be at least be able to have some say in this. However, my direct question to you, Mike, is about the timetable that is shown in this report, which takes us to June 2023 for ratification, as it were. By that time, there will be not only a reduced district council, but probably a new set of councillors. I'm just sort of thinking this through. A new council, and yet all the work has been done by this present council. How can they objectively sign off a document of such significance if they've had no role in the preparation of it?
Chair, the way in which the process works, and Councillor Ratcliffe knows this from previous involvement, and Councillor Purdy will know this as well, is that, you know, there is a substantial amount of work done up to the point at which adoption is necessary by the district council, and that includes having been through an examination by an inspector to look at the appropriateness of the strategy and the plan for the area. So given, yes, the timetable does take us to sort of that sort of time frame, it's not to say that it will actually be in June 2023. It could be early, it could be later. That's the timetable we're working to at the moment. But clearly, if it is in the circumstances where it is a new administration and a new council, I would envisage there would be probably, you know, a considerable amount of continuity from one authority to the next, and a great deal of review and reminder from officers to those new members of what we've been through, so that they can be confident that if it does get to that circumstances, that they are adopting something that's appropriate and been through the necessary scrutiny to allow them to adopt it at that particular point in time.
Councillor Pawley.
Yeah, I put my hand down because I've had my question answered. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor O'Brien.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so quite a dry subject this. So thanks, Mike, for making the report quite interesting and readable. We've got some questions on the risk assessment, actually, on page 71 and the following pages. I found quite interesting. The very first risk on staff recruitment and retention, you've assessed the likelihood of staff leaving or being off sick as high. So I'm intrigued as to how you reached that conclusion. The second risk assessment on the local plan not being found sound, as unfortunate previous occasion, you show the impact as only being medium. I would have thought the impact of a local plan not being found sound would be about as high as you can get, rather than medium. And on programme slippage, on the bottom of page 72, I see you assess the likelihood of the programme slipping as medium. I'm interested in what you define by medium, as to why the target isn't for that to be low, because we get a lot of criticism for local plan processes being slow. What is it about it? What is it about the preparation of the only item in the review? That's the local plan review. What is it about process that makes that likelihood medium rather than low? So 3 questions relating to the risk assessments there.
The likelihood of staff recruitment and retention, Councillor O'Brien makes a good point, and it's one I would hope that isn't high, and one that I think I probably do need to have another look at. For those members that were involved last time.
You thought it might be something you knew that we didn't know, Mike, there.
Well, for those that were involved in it last time, I didn't manage to fulfil my role right at the end for sickness reasons. And that did have quite a significant impact. To see Councillor Purdy smiling and sort of nodding his head, and Councillor Ratcliffe as well. But that did have quite an impact on the resources issues. Hopefully that isn't going to happen again. But clearly we have got a limited staff that are involved in this process. There's myself, 2 part-time officers, and others that come in as and when we require them to come in. So if we do end up with that situation, then the impact could well be high. The likelihood is it could be a low or a medium, but I can't explain exactly why I've put it as high, to be honest, at this moment in time. And I might have a think about that overnight in terms of making potential changes to it. The impact of the plan not being found sound, I think we've got it as medium there because we do our own checks and balances and our own assessment throughout the whole of the process to come to a view as to whether or not we're likely to be developing something which is an appropriate strategy for the area. Clearly, with the last one, we were able to identify to inspector that it should be found sound, and he accepted it. Whereas previously, we did take it to examination when we were found unsound, or we were found that we were found unsound initially, and therefore we had to go back to the drawing board. This is a review. It's not a whole-scale change. It's not a wholesale new plan. This is a review. So in this particular instance, the likelihood of not being found sound is not necessarily as high. Which was the other one, Councillor O'Brien?
Well, it was the impact of the unsoundness I was more worried about. The last one was about programme slippage and how why are you saying that is a medium risk rather than a low risk?
Well, I will say that on the basis of previous experience and the project management of the whole process, apart from little hiccup when I wasn't around, was well. We ran it very well, and we managed to deliver the local plan within the timescales with a small amount of slippage to pretty much to time.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that it's sort of, if we say the risk of programme slippage is medium, it sounds as though we're accepting a delay. I mean, we're okay with it. We're okay. To me, it gives the impression that as a council, we're okay with the prospect of it being delayed.
It's not intended to show that.
Okay.
Sorry, did you? I didn't. Your voice went very quiet then, Chris. Sorry. Is that me? Thank you. Hi. It's just one question, really. We did a previous report. We're talking about public consultation involving the public and everything we do. But looking at the programme, we don't involve the public until the second quarter of 2022. We have sort of 5 quarters where we're discussing it, and then the public get 1 quarter. I'm just wondering, is that normal, or just why particularly the public don't come in till the 6th quarter and we don't involve them earlier on?
Well, the reason for that, Councillor Gamble, is the fact that what we're doing in the initial stages, and it's all set out in the report that's at Council next week, is that the initial stages of the review process is all about evidence gathering and all about collecting the relevant data and doing the analysis of that with a view to identifying what the appropriate issues were and what potentially options there are to take forward a strategy for the plan. And once we've gone through that process of looking at the evidence and mulling over options, then we then go out to the members of the public and say, this is what we've got, and this is where we think the direction of travel should be for the plan. And then we have the engagement process from there, starting on from there.
Councillor Morley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm going to come through you, if I may, and ask a question to Councillor O'Brien there. He just made a very negative and to me very worrying comment about the high liability of the plan being found unsound. If I heard it right, that's kind of, I find that quite worrying. I'd like to know on what he bases that assumption. Thanks, Chair.
Really looking at the impact, Tony, there, not the likelihood. I'm suggesting that if it is found unsound, the likelihood is as it was previously, having been through this experience before, that means you have basically have to almost start again. It wasn't the likelihood I was questioning, it was the impact.
Thank that, Chair. Thanks.
Councillor Burfoot.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I think this is a very sound, informative report, so I applaud Mike for it. But just going back to his answers to Councillor Ratcliffe and others, and Councillor O'Brien particularly, on the programme for the local plan review, I'm still puzzled as to why the adoption of the plan, in other words, the final decision, is going to be made by a new council. Or shouldn't we be categorically aiming for a decision in the first quarter, or certainly say March or April of 2023, prior to the next election, so that we don't have this problem of a new council, potentially new administration, new chairs of committees, whatever, administering this work at the final, I suppose, the final furlong of the process. If we should either be well in advance, well past the 2023 elections, it was end of 2023 perhaps, or as I say, March or April prior to the elections. I don't see, it seems to be very marginal at the moment, and I agree with Councillor Ratcliffe. It would seem rather odd to expect a new council, new councillors to make a decision without having been involved in the previous debate.
The situation is this programme is based upon our experience of the preparation of the local plan last time around, and the timescales that were involved in that process at that point in time. As I said in the response to Councillor Ratcliffe, you know, this is an indicative timetable. It's not a timetable that's set in tablets of stone. It could be that the evidence base and everything suggests we've only got limited options, which would mean that potentially we could prepare things in a shorter time. It might be that some of the options that we've got and the opportunities we've got to develop the strategy take longer than we've got. It's based upon the experience of the previous local plan. Now, as I said, you know, there will be continuity between officers, and there will be an opportunity, if it does get to that circumstances, for those members of a new council to be given chapter and verse in detail of exactly what has gone before and where they are in terms of that particular process. Clearly, at that particular time, if members don't wish to adopt it, then clearly that will be an opportunity that they would have to take at that time. But they will be doing that in the light of advice from both officers and potentially from the legal team as to what the risk would be of doing that.
Yeah.
Councillor Purdy.
Thanks, Chair. Well, frankly, I think we're getting too forensic on this. And picking up Councillor Ratcliffe's point, I think that was more than a rhetorical question, Mike. I think it was a crystal ball question. And I'm sure that any new administration coming in is going to pick up some business from the previous administration. And I'm sure we are duty bound to try and ensure that we sign this off before the next term. But insofar as Mike's risk assessment is concerned, having been a risk manager at an NHS hospital, risk is all about an assessment at the time that you're looking at it. It's no more, no less. And I can't help but agree with Mike's assessment on the staff recruitment. When I became leader, one of the biggest things that concerned me was the number of single station officers we had. And as you know, unfortunately, Chief Exec had to pull his paper for bolstering CLT and 2 corporate directors. None of us envisaged COVID coming in. And so we're now at a time where, and I'm sure Mike's thinking his lucky stars is lucky to be alive, these single officer stations are now under much more strain than hitherto. And we've sent messages out as leader and deputy, and indeed Paul has, to ask members to please be considerate for the strain that's on our officers. And I would hope that you accept that and acknowledge that and realise that, God forbid, one of our single officers goes under a bus or gets ill again. And that's the precarious situation this authority is in. We're a small authority and we're dependent on the goodwill and the hard work of our officers. So it does worry me as leader with these single officer stations. I just hope that nothing else happens and we can get through this. Thanks, Chair.
Are you moving this, Councillor Purdy?
Yes, I'm happy to move it, Chair.
Councillor Wakeman.
Yes, I'd like to thank Mike for this report, and I'd like to second it, please, Chair.
That's great, thank you. I've no other speakers. It has been moved and seconded. Simon, would you like to go through the vote now, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Councillor Buckler.
For.
Bull.
For.
Martin Burfoot.
For.
Froggatt.
For.
Furness.
For.
Gamble.
Abstain.
Hobson.
For.
Hughes.
For.
Tony Morley.
For.
O'Brien.
For.
Pawley.
For.
Purdy.
For.
Ratcliffe.
For.
Statham.
For.
Sutton.
For.
Wayne.
For. Thank you.
And Wakeman.
For.
Okay, thank you, Chair. That's 16 for and 1 abstention.
Thank you, Simon. Well, I can close the business. I would just like to thank councillors for attending and for contributing, and also to watchers who've been watching this this committee meeting. Thank you very much. Good night. Bye.